Heroes have made poets, and poets heroes. When one side only of a story is heard and often repeated, the human mind becomes impressed with. Knowledge is in every country the surest basis of public happiness. I am particularly obliged in your favor of the rum out of your own private store. I shall always remember my duty in drinking of it, and then your honor's health can never be forgot. Still, I hope I shall always possess firmness and virtue enough to maintain what I consider the most enviable of all titles, the character of an honest man. For I love to indulge the contemplation of human nature in a progressive state of improvement and amelioration, and if the idea would not be considered as visionary and chimerical, I could fondly hope that the present plan of the great potentate of the North, Catherine the Great, might, in some measure, lay the foundation for that assimilation of language, which, producing assimilation of manners and interests, should one day remove many of the causes of hostility from amongst mankind. System in all things is the soul of business. To deliberate maturely, and execute promptly is the way to conduct it to advantage. With me, it has always been a maxim, rather to let my designs appear from my works, than by my expressions. Every post is honorable in which a man can serve his country. Having now finished the work assigned me, I retire from the great theatre of action. One of the expedients of party to acquire influence, within particular districts, is to misrepresent the opinions and aims of other districts. To be prepared for war is one of the most effectual means of preserving peace. A good moral character is the first essential in a man. It is therefore highly important that you should endeavor not only to be learned but virtuous. The situation in which I now stand, for the last time, in the midst of the representatives of the people of the United States, naturally recalls the period when the administration of the present form of government commenced, and I cannot omit the occasion, to congratulate you and my country, on the success of the experiment. A people unused to restraint must be led, they will not be drove. Arbitrary power is most easily established on the ruins of liberty abused to licentiousness. Unless someone pops in, unexpectedly, Mrs. Washington and myself will do what I believe has not been done within the last 20 years by us, that is to set down to dinner by ourselves. All see, and most admire, the glare which hovers round the external trappings of elevated office. To me there is nothing in it, beyond the luster which may be reflected from its connection with the power of promoting human felicity. I shall expect you will confine yourself to your studies, and diligently attend to them, endeavoring to make yourself master of whatever is recommended to, or required of you. The hours allotted for study, if really applied to it, instead of running up and down stairs, and wasted in conversation with anyone who will talk with you, will enable you to make considerable progress in whatsoever line is marked out for you, and that you may do it, is my sincere wish. The time is now near at hand which must probably determine whether Americans are to be freemen or slaves, whether they are to have any property they can call their own, whether their houses and farms are to be pillaged and destroyed, and themselves consigned to a state of wretchedness from which no human efforts will deliver them. The fate of unborn millions will now depend, under God, on the courage and conduct of this army. Our cruel and unrelenting enemy leaves us only the choice of brave resistance, or the most abject submission. We have, therefore, to resolve to conquer or die. Love is a mighty pretty thing, but like all other delicious things, it is cloying, and when the first transports of the passion begins to subside, which it assuredly will do, and yield, oftentimes too late, to more sober reflections, it serves to evince that love is too dainty a food to live upon alone, and ought not to be considered farther than as a necessary ingredient for that matrimonial happiness which results from a combination of cause. It is infinitely better to have a few good men than many indifferent ones. There can be no greater error than to expect or calculate upon real favors from nation to nation. At length, my dear Marquis, I am become a private citizen on the banks of the Potomac, and under the shadow of my own vine and my own fig tree, free from the bustle of a camp and the busy scenes of public life. I am solacing myself with those tranquil enjoyments, of which the soldier who is ever in pursuit of fame, the statesman whose watchful days and sleepless nights are spent in devising schemes to promote the welfare of his own, perhaps the ruin of other countries, as if this globe was insufficient for us all, and the courtier who is always watching the countenance of his prince, in hopes of catching a gracious smile, can have very little conception. For happily the government of the United States, which gives to bigotry no sanction, to persecution no assistance, requires only that they who live under its protection should demean themselves as good citizens, in giving it on all occasions their effectual support. It is better to offer no excuse than a bad one. I will not give up the hope of seeing you at Mount Vernon, before I quit the stage of human action, the idea of out be too painful. Happiness depends more upon the internal frame of a person's own mind than on the externals in the world. I retain an unalterable affection for you, which neither time or distance can change. The consideration that human happiness and moral duty are inseparably connected, will always continue to prompt me to promote the progress of the former, by inculcating the practice of the latter. Few men have virtue to withstand the highest bidder. For myself, the delay may be compared to a reprieve, for in confidence I can assure you, with the world it would obtain little credit, that my movements to the chair of government will be accompanied with feelings not unlike those of a culprit who is going to the place of his execution. Something is due to the man who puts his life in his hand, hazards his health and forsakes the sweets of domestic enjoyments. In short, the ministry may rely on it that Americans will never be taxed, without their own consent, that the cause of Boston, the despotic measures in respect to it I mean now as and ever will be considered as the cause of America, not that we approve their conduct and destroy the tea, and that we shall not suffer ourselves to be sacrificed by piecemeal, though God only knows what is to become of us, threatened as we are with so many hovering evils as hang over us at present. Be courteous to all, but intimate with few, and let those few be well tried before you give them your confidence. True friendship is a plant of slow growth, and must undergo and withstand the shocks of adversity before it is entitled to the appellation. My brave fellows, you have done all I asked you to do, and more than can be reasonably expected, but your country is at stake, your wives, your houses and all that you hold dear. You have worn yourselves out with fatigues and hardships, but we know not how to spare you. If you will consent to stay 1 month longer, you will render that service to the cause of liberty, and to your country, which you probably can never do under any other circumstances. Without virtue and without integrity the finest talents of the most brilliant accomplishments can never feign the respect or conciliate the esteem of the truly valuable art of mankind. While we are contending for our own liberty, we should be very cautious not to violate the rights of conscience in others, ever considering that God alone is the judge of the hearts of men, and to him only in this case they are answerable. Nothing is a greater stranger to my breast, or a sin that my soul more abhors, than that black and detestable one, ingratitude. At a time, when our lordly masters in Great Britain will be satisfied with nothing less than the deprivation of American freedom, it seems highly necessary that something should be done to avert the stroke, and maintain the liberty, which we have derived from our ancestors. But the manner of doing it, to answer the purpose effectually, is the point in question. That no man should scruple, or hesitate a moment, to use arms in defense of so valuable a blessing, on which all the good and evil of life depends, is clearly my opinion. Yet arms, I would beg leave to add, should be the last resource, the dernier resort. Addresses to the throne, and remonstrances to Parliament, we have already, it is said, proved the inefficacy of. How far, then, their attention to our rights and privileges is to be awakened or alarmed, by starving their trade and manufacturers, remains to be tried. I shall not be deprived, of a comfort in the worst event, if I retain a consciousness of having acted to the best of my judgment. There is a destiny which has the control of our actions, not to be resisted by the strongest efforts of human nature. Remember that it is the actions, and not the commission, that make the officer, and that there is more expected from him, than the title. It is with pleasure I receive reproof, when reproof is due, because no person can be readier to accuse me, than I am to acknowledge an error, when I am guilty of one, nor more desirous of. I have diligently sought the public welfare, and have endeavored to inculcate the same principles in all that are under me. These reflections will be a cordial to my mind as long as I am able to distinguish between good and evil. The ways of Providence being inscrutable, and the justice of it not to be scanned by the shallow eye of humanity, nor to be counteracted by the utmost efforts of human power or wisdom, resignation, and as far as the strength of our reason and religion can carry us, a cheerful acquiescence to the divine will, is what we are to aim. A man's intentions should be allowed in some respects to plead for his actions. I shall make it the most agreeable part of my duty to study merit, and reward the brave and deserving. By the all-powerful dispensations of Providence, I have been protected beyond all human probability and expectation, for I had 4 bullets through my coat, and 2 horses shot under me, yet escaped unhurt, although death was leveling my companions on every side. It is our true policy to steer clear of permanent alliance with any portion of the foreign world. Of all the animosities which have existed among mankind, those which are caused by a difference of sentiments in religion appear to be the most inveterate and distressing, and ought most to be deprecated. I hold the maxim no less applicable to public than to private affairs, that honesty is the best policy. Truth will ultimately prevail where pains is taken to bring it to light. As a very important source of strength and security, cherish public credit. One method of preserving it is, to use it as sparingly as possible, avoiding occasions of expense by cultivating peace, but remembering also that timely disbursements to prepare for danger frequently prevent much greater disbursements to repel it, avoiding likewise the accumulation of debt, not only by shunning occasions of expense, but by vigorous exertions in time of peace to discharge the debts, which unavoidable wars may have occasion, not ungenerously throwing upon posterity the burthen, which we ourselves ought to bear. However, political parties may now and then answer popular ends. They are likely in the course of time and things, to become potent engines, by which cunning, ambitious, and unprincipled men will be enabled to subvert the power of the people and to usurp for themselves the reins of government, destroying afterwards the very engines which have lifted them to unjust dominion. To contract new debts is not the way to pay old ones. There is nothing so likely to produce peace as to be well prepared to meet an enemy. Liberty, when it begins to take root, is a plant of rapid growth. The right wing, where I stood, was exposed to and received all the enemy's fire. I heard the bullets whistle, and, believe me, there is something charming in the sound. Let us therefore animate and encourage each other, and show the whole world that a freeman, contending for liberty on his own ground, is superior to any slavish mercenary on earth. Three things prompt men to a regular discharge of their duty in time of action: natural bravery, hope of reward, and fear of punishment. It may be laid down as a primary position, and the basis of our system, that every citizen who enjoys the protection of a free government, owes not only a proportion of his property, but even his personal services to the defense of it, and consequently that the citizens of America, with a few legal and official exceptions, from 18 to 50 years of age should be born on the militia rolls, provided with uniform arms, and so far accustomed to the use of them, that the total strength of the country might be called forth at a short notice on any very interesting emergency. Citizens by birth or choice, of a common country, that country has a right to concentrate your affections. The name of American, which belongs to you, in your national capacity, must always exalt the just pride of patriotism, more than any appellation derived from local discriminations. No people can be bound to acknowledge and adore the invisible hand, which conducts the affairs of men more than the people of the United States. Every step, by which they have advanced to the character of an independent nation, seems to have been distinguished by some token of providential agency. We should never despair. Our situation before has been unpromising and has changed for the better, so I trust, it will again. If new difficulties arise, we must only put forth new exertions and proportion our efforts to the exigency of the times. I can bear to hear of imputed or real errors. The man who wishes to stand well in the opinion of others must do this, because he is thereby enabled to correct his faults, or remove prejudices which are imbibed against him. I now make it my earnest prayer, that God would have you, and the state over which you preside, in his holy protection, that he would incline the hearts of the citizens to cultivate a spirit of subordination and obedience to government, to entertain a brotherly affection and love for one another, for their fellow citizens of the United States at large, and particularly for their brethren who have served in the field, and finally, that he would most graciously be pleased to dispose us all, to do justice, to love mercy, and to demean ourselves with that charity, humility and pacific temper of mind, which were the characteristics of the divine author of our blessed religion, and without an humble imitation of whose example in these things, we can never hope to be a happy nation. If in the opinion of the people, the distribution or modification of the constitutional powers be in any particular wrong, let it be corrected by an amendment in the way which the Constitution designates. But let there be no change by usurpation, for though this, in one instance, may be the instrument of good, it is the customary weapon by which free governments are destroyed. If we desire to avoid insult, we must be able to repel it. If we desire to secure peace, one of the most powerful instruments of our rising prosperity, it must be known, that we are at all times ready for war. A natural parent has only two things principally to consider: the improvement of his son, and the finances to do it with. For if men are to be precluded from offering their sentiments on a matter, which may involve the most serious and alarming consequences, that can invite the consideration of mankind, reason is of no use to us, the freedom of speech may be taken away, and, dumb and silent we may be led, like sheep, to the slaughter. It is important, that the habits of thinking in a free country should inspire caution in those entrusted with its administration, to confine themselves within their respective constitutional spheres, avoiding in the exercise of the powers of one department to encroach upon another. A free people ought not only to be armed, but disciplined, to which end a uniform and well-digested plan is requisite, and their safety and interest require that they should promote such manufactories as tend to render them independent of others for essential, particularly military, supplies. I had always hoped that this land might become a safe and agreeable asylum to the virtuous and persecuted part of mankind, to whatever nation they might belong. Avoid gaming. This is a vice which is productive of every possible evil. Equally injurious to the morals and health of its votaries, it is the child of avarice, the brother of iniquity, and father of mischief. It has been the ruin of many worthy families, the loss of many a man's honor, and the cause of suicide. Thanks for watching. Like and comment, subscribe.